Hello, I'm Lord Jimsicle, and you're watching You Have Issues, a programme all about comics. Welcome back to Superman Month, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about all the films from the Donner movies up until Superman Returns. My first introduction to Superman was when I was a kid, when me and my brother turned on the TV one day and saw Richard Donner's 1978 masterpiece, Superman the Movie. We were gobsmacked at how brilliant it was, and we loved everything about it. Needless to say, we taped it and watched it over and over again. Superman the Movie was an excellent tour de force for its time. Everything about it is iconic, from John Williams' title theme to the brilliantly charismatic Christopher Reeve, who perfectly captured the idealism that Superman symbolises. The film has a unique casting consisting of then unknown actor Christopher Reeve, surrounded by an A-list supporting cast consisting of the likes of Marlon Brando as Jor-El and Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor. This tradition carried on to the likes of Superman Returns and Man of Steel, often nicknamed Superman casting. Christopher Reeve's performance as the Man of Steel is very memorable. As mentioned previously, he perfectly embodied the idealism and the heroic attributes that the character is famous for. It's a superhero film that has spectacular pacing. The film covers the destruction of Krypton, then onto Kal-El landing in Kansas and being raised in Smallville, then onto Clark moving to Metropolis to begin his adventures as Superman, all in the first act of the movie. The spectacle of seeing the icy world of Krypton is something that still amazes me. It strikes me as a civilization of great people coming to an end, a society so advanced that they fail to see their own shortcomings, which of course leads to the Krypton Council rebuffing Jor-El's prediction of the planet's destruction and the end of the Kryptonian race. This icy portrayal of Krypton is something that was new to the Superman franchise at the time, and was commonly used in later incarnations as the architecture of the Fortress of Solitude and for the planet itself. This movie also has the best example I've ever seen of the Clark Kent disguise working tremendously. It's wrong to assume that it's just a pair of glasses. It's also his posture, his hair, his clumsiness, generally obfuscating stupidity, and his voice being an octave higher are all things that keep people from thinking that this perceived buffoon is the Man of Steel. Of course, we have arch-nemesis Lex Luthor as the scheming, cackling villain who opposes Superman. Played by Gene Hackman, this iteration seems to have a thing for land, and is so hammy I wouldn't be surprised if the entire set smelled of pork.
Wonderful. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Every bit the evil genius, he devises a plan to level the entire west coast of the United States in order to further a large-scale real estate scam, and also devises a way to stop Superman in the process. One thing that baffles me is how quickly he came to the realisation that an irradiated green rock from Krypton in a museum would be harmful to Superman, but not to humans. It's a widely loved film, but it still gets criticism for one particular scene. The famous turn the world back through time scene is something that still polarises fans to this day. It's not something that's ever baffled me personally, but if he's fast enough to turn the world back, there's no reason he couldn't have been able to catch the two missiles in time. Despite that, it's a great scene, and the film wouldn't be the same without it. Sowing the seeds planted at the beginning of the previous film, Superman 2 was released in theatres in summer 1980. This was definitely the most action-packed film of the series. Much of the cast from the previous movie returned, naturally, as the previous film and this one were filmed back-to-back, but all the previous cast members were overshadowed by the villains of the piece, 3 Kryptonian criminals who were inadvertently freed from the Phantom Zone just in time to try and invade Earth. Superman, of course, has to put a stop to their dastardly schemes. It more than matched the previous film, as it ramped up the action by having Superman battling Kryptonian criminals Ursa, Non, and finally, General Zod, played by Terence Stamp. You thought Hackman was a bit of a ham? Terence Stamp is clearly having the time of his life playing this role, and in the most over-the-top way possible. Wouldn't have it any other way. Not that they're the only villains of this movie. Lex Luthor returns and further expresses his affinity for land as he offers Zod the location of Superman in exchange for being given control over Australia. And there's me thinking estate agents in London are scumbags. It's definitely a fun, action-packed movie with some classic moments such as the big showdown in the middle of Metropolis where the Man of Steel battles the criminals with several civilians in the crossfire. This bit here where the criminals storm the Daily Planet building is awesome too. Hang on a minute, what's that? Say what you like about the staff of the Daily Planet, they laugh in the face of adversity. That wall couldn't stop him! Eat briefcase, you monster! One part of the movie that made no sense plot-wise is when Superman gives up his powers in order to be with Lois. I don't see any reason he can't be with her when he's Clark Kent. The film had a troubled production from the start. Producers Alex and Ilya Solkind were putting a lot of pressure on Richard Donner by interfering with the production, as it had gone way over budget already. Donner was fired, and in his place came Richard Lester, who was known for his work on the Three Musketeers movie and had a more comical style. The differences were noticeable, but the final film was a resounding success. However, in 2006, Richard Donner responded to a huge online petition in order for him to release his own cut of Superman 2, which was sharply different from the original cut. What followed was Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut. Gone are the comical scenes like Lois falling into Niagara Falls to try and out Clark as Superman, and the depictions of people hilariously falling over or losing their ice cream when the Kryptonians are blowing away the crowd, by replacing with more serious scenes. Most notably is a scene where Zod and co stormed the White House to announce their rule over the world. They even used the originally shot ending in the Fortress of Solitude, which consists of Zod menacingly threatening Superman, which might not sound like much, but is more gripping than being hit with a cellophane S followed by a teleport contest like in the original cut. My only criticism of this cut is the reuse of the turning the world back through time sequence to undo the damage caused by the renegade Kryptonians. Some things you just don't do twice, although saying that, it's a lot better than the mind-scrambling kiss that was in the original cut. This film was followed by the god-awful Superman 3, which may as well have been called Richard Pryor the Movie, co-starring Superman. The premise of this story is that there's an evil computer network that Superman has to stop. The only thing worth watching in this movie is Superman being split into two beings with his evil self getting drunk and being a dick. Aside from that, this film is shit. Wait a sec, drunk Superman's costume here has the same colour scheme as the Man of Steel costume. Oh Christ, I'm really worried about Man of Steel now. Next up was Superman 4, in which I'll deliver the shortest review possible. Don't bother watching it, you're not going to get that hour and a half back. 2006 saw the long-awaited comeback for the Man of Steel on the silver screen. With X-Men director Bryan Singer at the helm, Superman Returns was released to a whole new generation of fans and depicted Superman returning to Earth after a 5-year absence, searching the galaxy for survivors of Krypton's destruction. Keeping in line with traditional Superman casting, newcomer Brandon Routh was cast as the title hero and had the supporting cast of Kate Bosworth as Lois Lane, Frank Langella as Perry White, and the unforgettable Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor. Brandon Routh did quite a decent job of portraying Superman, even though he was a bit dull in places. Many people mainly praise his portrayal because he very closely resembled Christopher Reeve. I did not care for Bosworth's portrayal as Lois Lane. She didn't convince me as a feisty Pulitzer Prize winner, and just spent most of the movie complaining about Superman's absence. Kevin Spacey most certainly stole the show as Lex Luthor, and was easily the best part of the movie. Superman himself came across as just a bit whiny and, dare I say it, emo. He returns after 5 years and is upset that Lois has moved on and started a family, but then goes as far as hovering outside her house and listening into a conversation between her and her fiancé. Creepy stuff. The action scenes in this movie are pretty good, but not as good as a modern audience would expect. Of course, there's the awesome scene where he saves the space shuttle and airliner, and towards the end when he's saving Metropolis from an earthquake. But the best has to be when this chap here empties a Gatling gun at Superman, and then comes what can only be described as a potential Krypton contact lenses advert. It is often described as a sequel and a remake to Richard Donner's 1978 movie. Sounds confusing? Well, plot-wise, Superman 3 and 4 were removed from continuity, so Superman Returns takes place after Superman 2, but it has many similar scenes to the first one, and even goes as far as using the same dialogue in other scenes.
Well, I certainly hope this little incident hasn't put you off flying. Statistically speaking, of course, it's still the safest way to travel.
The film even further continued Lex Luthor's affinity for land, but completely outdoes his original scheme from the first movie to make a mint off obtaining land illegally. His scheme consists of stealing crystals from Superman's fortress, encasing it with a reshaped chunk of kryptonite, placing it inside a missile, then launching it into the sea, which then causes a gigantic ugly island to emerge that clearly nobody wants to live on. He's about as subtle as a brick to the face. The subplot about Superman's son was utterly pointless and sent the internet into a debating frenzy about how it was possible for Superman and Lois to have a baby. This made people refer to the infamous Mallrats scene where Brody and T.S. discuss the difficulties Lois Lane would have being pregnant with Superman's baby. Some went even further back and referred to the 1971 essay Man of Steel, Woman of Kleenex by science fiction writer Larry Niven, which explored the same subject but in greater detail. In my opinion, it was an entertaining enough movie, but it felt more like a tribute to the Christopher Reeve movies than an actual sequel. The film was a box office success and garnered positive reviews, but the studio execs felt it did not make as much as it should have. Thus, a sequel to Superman Returns was left in development hell for a while, until it was announced that Warner Brothers were rebooting the franchise starting with Man of Steel. Thank you for watching this episode of You Have Issues. I'm Lord Jimsicle, and stay tuned for some more Superman Month.